Hi there, thanks again for tuning into this YouTube channel where I talk about my sketchbooks over the years. The one I'll be discussing today is sketchbook number 6. So this one covers February 2019 to October 2019. And this is very much the last part, the second part really, of my Italian Grand Tour. So this book will be covering Florence, Bologna and Venice, and little bits of Amsterdam and Krakow as well. So don't forget to subscribe and leave some lovely comments. Thanks again. Sketchbook number 6. So this book is dealing with the second part, the last part of my Italian journey. And we're dealing with Florence, Bologna and Venice. So there's a couple of ones to start off with, as in Sketchbook 5 of London. And this is the very beginning of 2019. So this is Queen's House again in Greenwich, just up the road from me where I used to live. And I'm really liking this angle actually, looking on towards Canary Wharf, always building skyscrapers. So there's probably twice as many there now. This is going back to 2019. The Victoria Memorial just outside Buckingham Palace. That was a nice, very warm afternoon, to say that it was early March, I think. The Supreme Court in central London, just opposite the Houses of Parliament. So by this point, I'm, as in the previous sketchbook, I'm kind of focusing in on a particular part, because I don't really want to capture the whole thing. What really interests me is getting a certain part of an archway or a certain part of that architecture, and really I'll just sit opposite on a park bench or somewhere and just do the whole sort of looking through your fingers like this, just to kind of capture what you think might be quite good on the page, and then just taking it from there really. And what I'll explain in future videos is a dot-to-dot method. So really, I mean, in short, the dot-to-dot method, I'll explain it more in future episodes, but really it's just kind of getting certain points. If I'm looking, so that I'm sort of making sure, it doesn't always work, but making sure that I'm capturing really what I want to capture. So things aren't going off the page, and I'm not spending too much time on a particular part with all the detail. It's really just me sort of balancing everything out on the page, getting the composition right, and then that really sort of relaxes me into the sketch. I know that if I'm making marks, dots here, here and here, and a dot there and a dot here, at least I know I can concentrate on this. I've got these dots to kind of join up these lines, and then from there I know that I can draw down to at least down to this section. So I'm making a couple of dots here, and then really after about sort of 10 or 15 minutes of doing this, you have the basic principles of the sketch that you want to produce just by doing a couple of dots, and you're sort of perfecting it as you go along. But that's the basic premise of the dot-to-dot method. This is the Old Bailey, just around the corner from the Royal Courts of Justice. Again, just a strange angle that I wanted to capture. Bright yellow. This one I wasn't too happy with. This was Borough Market. I've done quite a lot of sketches in Borough Market over the years. This one wasn't a particularly successful one. I'm not really sure why. The ones in the next couple of sketchbooks are a lot better, but this, for some reason, it's just, I think there's too many straight lines on the upper part of the page, and it didn't really, you can't really tell what I'm trying trying to encapsulate with this one. It's a bit of a strange one. And I think the foreground background colour, I didn't introduce it with this. It's basically all dark green, so maybe that had a part to play. And this is Lincoln's Inn Chapel, Undercroft. So this is like a network of elaborate arches underneath Lincoln's Inn Chapel, just round the corner from Holborn. So this is one of the more successful Borough Market sketches, again encapsulating just a section of it. So just stood on the corner opposite the Market Porter pub. Probably took me about an hour and a half or so. And it's the usual foreground, background kind of colour thing happening. But it's just really interesting to get all this network of poles and sort of iron framework and the glass work as well. So if I'm drawing something a little bit more solid like the ironwork, that is a solid, more of a solid action happening there. But if it's something like, I'm just creating a little bit of shadow, so I don't want it to be as dark as that, but I do want to use the same pen. I'm just using line work like this, strokes of line work. And you can see there's a difference between that and that. Just a very simple method that enables you to use the same coloured pen, but have a different effect. So this was Fez in Morocco. This was a couple of months before the last part of my Italian holiday. I think this was called something like the Blue Arch. It's quite a famous entrance into the old part of Fez itself. So I was staying in a little place just sort of beyond this point, and there was a cafe opposite, and sat and maybe for an hour and a half. So the locals were quite impressed by what I was trying to do. This was actually on the rooftop of the apartment that I stayed at for about 4 or 5 days. So it's all very ramshackle, but I quite like that about it. These are the mountains going up, and all the satellite dishes on the top of all the other apartments and houses. Most of them have flat roofs, and a lot of them have their own washing out on there, because these are their gardens really. These are their sort of little verandas and terraces. This was the marketplace very early in the morning before they were setting up, so hardly any people here. By the time I'd finished the sketch, people were starting to creep up this way to set up their stalls. But you can sort of see where this archway is that goes into the sort of indoor part of the market. People starting to formulate. There's a whole sort of road that goes up here where people are selling fresh fruit and produce. Lots of street kids, local kids, came to sort of sit with me while I was sketching, wondering what I was doing, what I was up to. This one I talked about in a previous short film. So this was in central London, very quiet spot, an old church that was bombed during the Second World War. And this was a really nice spot, and I wanted to come back to it again. The first sketch from a couple of years previous, I wasn't happy with. I was just discovering the Posca pens for the first time. But this one I just wanted to come back to and really capture it properly in my eyes. So this was sort of autumn time. I think the first sketch, everything was in bloom, but this you can see, and I prefer this sketch for that reason as well. Because the plants and all the leaves, everything isn't in full bloom yet, because we're dealing with March, April. So you can see all this sort of work, detailed work happening. I get quite engrossed in these little details, as you'll see in future sketches. It's the view looking towards Tower of London. Nunhead Cemetery, again, my local cemetery in southeast London. Holborn Viaduct. I spent quite a bit of time on this one. You sort of, there's a road that goes underneath this bridge, and you walk up a little turret, tower, steps, and there's a little sort of balcony area where I could sort of rest my sketchbook, and it was quite a comfortable spot actually, just to get engrossed in this particular view. And I had several attempts in sketchbooks 1 and 2, I think, where I think I only got as far as drawing this particular statue on the bridge, and then sort of abandoned it for whatever reason, but I was determined at some stage to come back and capture the whole thing. It's very detailed, but often what I find with buildings and bridges and things like that is the monotony, and the monotony of the bridge. So you have certain elements here where you're doing little bits, little bits, little bits, little bits, and then and it's the same thing happening here. And you build it, so this actually doesn't take that much time at all. And once you get onto these windows, once you get the angle and the dimensions right and the viewpoint, the rest of it is just kind of filling out. And it's a little bit laborious, so sometimes you have to kind of change certain windows and certain shapes and certain shadows within the glass, just to make it more visually stimulating. But that's one of my favourites from this book. And the view looking towards, this is Southwark Cathedral within Borough Market. So I quite like this. I'm getting into interesting compositions, tight compositions, but also really interesting old architecture versus newer 21st century architecture. This was this no longer stands. This is the old Elephant and Castle shopping centre in South London, near the roundabout. Imperial War Museum, looking down on an old Spitfire that hangs from wires. So there's different layers to this. Obviously this layer, darker colour, and then the pink. It was quite nice to do this one, not just leaving these parts of the page blank, apart from the pink figures below from a certain angle, but actually introducing lines. And I'm starting to get into that. I'm starting to get a little bit more playful with what I want to suggest through marker pens, because I am only dealing with the 0.7 nib, the fine nib. So I want to create different effects through that. Occasionally I'm using a thicker pen to block out a whole section. This is in Greenwich. Trip to Amsterdam, so using the same method here as well. This was the view from my hotel window. So this was a trip I made with my brother and his friend. Didn't quite get the top of that building. Somebody had a go at me for that. But it was fun nonetheless. It was all intentional, honest. This one was another favourite because it's completely filling the page. You know, there's no section where there's any sky anywhere, and I quite like that. Just really sort of going all in with the detail, with the windows. Complete blast of colour, blast of orange. So one of my oldest best friends, Bob, moved to Hastings a couple of years ago. So I used to go down and see him for weekends. And this is one of those visits. It might be the first visit actually. So this is just on the beach, sketching the fishing boats and all the walkways. It's very similar to Ramsgate actually in that respect, little alleyways and walkways, very hilly. Really nice to document. This is back in London, one of my favourite pubs at the time, Coach and Horses. in Soho. Some of the regulars sat outside, wondering what I was up to. I think they have a print of this behind the bar now if you walk into this pub. Or certainly at the time they had it framed up. Whether it's there now or not, I don't know. Highgate Cemetery, this is one of my favourite sketches, I think. Not just from this book, but from all of the sketchbooks. I just decided to go up to, there's two sections of Highgate Cemetery. There's one where you have to pay to get in and there's guided tours, but there's no real opportunity for me to sit and sketch for 2 hours. You have to be with the group at all times, really. You can take photographs, but that's about it. But then there's another section, the north side, I think, where you can pay £4 or whatever and walk around to your heart's content and do whatever. So I took a little fold-up stool with me, and it was an amazing summer afternoon. I hadn't been up to that part of London before, so everything was new to me, and it was fantastic. And the choice of the colour pens, the darker sort of purple, and I'm really getting confident with the pens now and the markings, and especially with drawing trees and nature and how to encapsulate, not to go too far in with the detail, but just kind of hatch marks to represent different leaves and different trees, different types of trees as well. And this is another one where I'm using 3 coloured pens rather than the 2 standard. So there's an orange one there, which it took me quite a while to decide to go with orange, because once you've committed, you can't really go back. But I think it worked quite well. So that overall, that probably took me about 2 hours. But that was a lovely afternoon, not being disturbed with the occasional dog walker, etc. So this is Florence. So this is the first city on the last part of the Italian holiday. So this is the Cathedral of Florence with the Duomo in the background, and that was just one of the most impressive sights I've ever seen on any holiday, I think. Just checking into my hotel, my Airbnb place, and then a couple of hours later just walking into town and walking around, trying to find a nice bar for a beer, and just walking around this corner to see this. It's just an incredible sight. I'll never forget that. So obviously the next day I made sure that I was up early, sat on a particular seat to capture this. So this probably took not that long, actually, about an hour and a half, possibly 2 hours. But as I said in previous sketches, once you get the monotony of certain parts, and once you get certain dot-to-dot methods that I use in place, then the rest of it kind of follows. This one, Piazza della Signoria, I think it's called. So this is just around the corner from the Uffizi Gallery. And it's an arched kind of open-air gallery space, I suppose, that's been there for quite some years with sculptures. So anyone can walk in, it's free to go in. It's not a ticketed thing or anything like that. And I had a bit of trouble sketching because my Posca pens are acrylic based. So I kept having people that work there, guards or whatever, coming up saying, no, you can't do this. Because normally, if you have plenty of people that are urban sketchers that are dealing with just crayons or pencils, coloured pencils, and that's fine. But anything ink-based, particularly acrylic ink-based, they think that you're going to start vandalising these statues with graffiti. But I kept insisting very nicely, at least in the beginning. But I got my own way, and I managed to convince them that all I was doing was just sitting here, trying to encapsulate these sculptures. So this took about an hour or so, and I actually showed them the sketch afterwards, and they agreed that, you know, that it was worth it. So that was quite a strange, tense moment for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I was about halfway through this sketch before they even noticed what I was doing. So I was insisting that I didn't really want to leave. I wanted to finish this sketch, but it turned out well. I was quite happy with it. Another part of Florence. Again, just such a beautiful city, dying to go back. There's something on every corner to sketch. This is in Krakow. Not entirely successful, but it was okay. I think it was probably the darkness of the page, really. This was the Fountain of Neptune in Bologna. If you look at the original post on Instagram, all of this section in the background is white, and I should have left it like that. But I think the day after I did this, when I was still in Bologna, in my hotel room, I just got the Posca pens out and did this whole background in a sort of a light peach colour, and I kind of regretted it. So afterwards, once I got back home, I went over it the best I could with a white pen. But you can see the pink sort of peach colour is still trying to sort of pop through the white. So that's something that happens to me occasionally, where I'm not happy with a sketch, and after I've posted it, I sort of fiddle about with it and not ruin the sketch entirely, but wish I hadn't have bothered. This was a nice one just on the street corner in Bologna, the Twin Towers. And it's just a whole network of cables for the trams and the traffic lights, and I just wanted to encapsulate as much as I could to make it really busy and frenetic. I was quite pleased with this one, actually. I think it encapsulates everything that I'm trying to say. A typical street in Bologna. I was quite pleased with this one as well. Just because of the angle, I think, and the arches. Very difficult to get right, but again, with the dot-to-dot method, you're always trusting your own judgment, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but with this one it did. This was the very first sketch. I checked into the hotel and walked up to the top of the hill. And I started this, but at the top of the hill, because it's such an amazing viewpoint, you get so many tourists at certain parts of the evening. So it was getting to a point where I was getting overwhelmed with tourists because I was sat on this step, so I couldn't see really what I was sketching. It's too many people getting in the way. So I started this one, and then the next morning, very early, I had some breakfast and then walked back up to the hill to finish this one. But I took a risk with encapsulating the Cathedral of Florence with a darker pen, and then the rest with a slightly lighter tone. But I think it worked out. I obviously wanted this bit to be more dominant than the rest. This is a sketch that didn't quite work out. I can't remember what cemetery this was. It wasn't Nunhead. I think it was another one, just again in southeast London. And I tried to get the angel's face there, but somewhere along the way it went wrong. But overall, the rest of the sketch I'm actually quite pleased with. But because the very sort of focal point, the face, sort of went wrong, I decided to abandon it and not post it. So this is in Venice. Again, very touristy. It was that time of year. I should have known, really, but I had an amazing 3 or 4 days there. I'd been there before, so I knew what to expect. And it's really just finding quiet spots. An impossible task, really, but just such an amazing city. I didn't really mind too much. Trying to encapsulate the sort of waves coming in, the ripples underneath the boats. I'm not entirely convinced by this sketch. I think the ripples could have been just a little bit more, kind of less is more, really. I think I went a little bit too much over the top with all of that. So really from sort of that bit upwards, I'm kind of happy with, but this bit, not so much. And again, a really interesting sort of composition. You can see by the, excuse me, the crowds of people there, just on the bottom. A very, very hot afternoon. And I have smaller sketchbooks as well that I'm sort of, throughout these Italian holidays, I'm capturing people with the smaller moleskin sketchbooks. It's a little quiet moment on a bridge. The sort of faded architecture is just amazing. It's you know, a lot of architecture in Venice is in serious danger of collapsing, but just to document through sketching, they're just incredible. There's so many different bits of detail. This is back in Hastings again, visiting my friend for the weekend. This is the sort of ruined castle at the top of the hill. Again, using the sort of line work for the sky, just something a little bit different. Natural History Museum. And these lines again in the background, I think I probably did this before I left the house. And then once I got on site, if you like, started drawing this skeleton, dinosaur skeleton. Very nice, you know, really nice, different, interesting composition, angle, viewpoint. Cemeteries, I'm really getting into cemeteries by this point as well. Different ones all dotted around London. They're so interesting because a lot of them aren't kept very well. They're overgrown. Statues and gravestones over time of kind of leaning in certain ways. Everything's just been left to its own device, really. This is a more detailed one of Nunhead Cemetery, just around the corner from me. And this one did take a good couple of hours. 3-colour process as well, which I think worked. The green and then the light blue and then the pink. Really getting into all the, again, minutiae, all the detail. So these ones I love spending time on, because you're not getting disturbed by anyone. The occasional dog walker, the occasional person that says hello, but that's pretty much it. You can really immerse yourself, you can really get lost in the detail of all the leaf work and all the branch work. And it's what you put into it and it's what you leave behind as well. It's a kind of a delicate, very precise process, I think, when you're sketching something like this. You really are trusting your own judgment. You don't want to go too far over the top. And it's the same with this one as well. This was West Norwood Cemetery. I think West Norwood was the previous sketch that didn't work with the angel's face. But this one was a little bit more successful. I think this was the same day, actually, same afternoon. And this was some sort of statue sculpture that was sort of hanging on to this sort of plinth-like structure, but all the growth and all the network of knotweeds and things like that had grown around, I just found fascinating. This is a sketch that didn't quite work out at the beginning, and I went back to sort of dabble with. I do that occasionally. The Albert Memorial, just outside the Albert Hall, Knightsbridge, Kensington. So I think I painted this bit in grey and it didn't really work, so I just went over it with this particular section where it was grey, and it was too dominant, this grey patchwork. I just went over it with white pen, and it just enabled these features, these bits of sculpture, to kind of pop back out again through the grey work. So it immediately became a little more successful. And Krakow again with my brother and his friend. Back in London. the British Museum. Again, just doing the lines, just as kind of prepping the page really for something different. And then just a very quick, probably only took about half an hour just to capture these three heads that were displayed all together. Just documenting them. And this is in the V&A. There's actual photos of me from someone that was walking past that was quite impressed with what I was trying to encapsulate. There's photos of me sketching this. And the same with the Bologna sketch as well. This one that I was talking about earlier. There's somebody that followed me on Instagram, walked past and recognized my style and actually ended up taking photos of me sketching it. And we had a chat for about 5 or 10 minutes. So that was a really lovely moment. I forgot to mention that. And so this is back in London. The last couple of pages of this book, the V&A. And this is Westminster Bridge as you walk up. This is on the south side. So London Eye from a slightly different angle. I got a huge number of likes for this one for some reason. Somebody influential must have tagged me in to something else, but that was a nice afternoon. And again, by this stage, we're getting really confident with the pens, not just with the viewpoints and everything, but with the 3-colour process rather than 2-colour. So it's a darker purple and then the red and the pink. So I found that sort of combination worked really well, that colour combination. Blackfriars Bridge, looking back over towards and up to Fleet Street. And I think this is the last sketch, the British Museum. So that was sketchbook number 6. So thanks again for joining this particular talk. Hope you've enjoyed it. And tune in for more in the future. Thanks again.